Thank you for joining us for the June meeting of the San Antonio chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas. We always like to start off by welcoming any new members. Do we have any new members with us in the room? No, all right. Also, all of our returning members. I see many members' faces here. Do we have any visitors today? Oh, wow, we've got quite a few. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And of course, everybody that is watching on Zoom, thank you for coming and joining us. I wanted to highlight diversity this month, and you can see a number of different images here that have been taken over the past few days from my native landscape. Just showing diversity of mostly flowering things, but some of the native plants that are showy right now. A lot of them are really showy just because of the recent rains that we've had. And I got interested in native plants while I was studying ecology, and I learned how important biodiversity was at that time and how important diversity within plant communities and among plant communities is for just all of Earth's resources, really, and humans as well. With diversity comes stability and resilience to disturbances. And so if you're looking for ways to improve your garden, improve the habitat value of your garden, your landscape, one way to do that is by adding diversity. And you can do that by adding species that you don't already have in your landscape. And a simple way to think about how to do that is finding plants with different colored flowers than you already have, plants that have flowers of different shapes than you already have, plants of different shapes and sizes for structural diversity, and all of those things, if you do that, will help benefit the wildlife using your landscape, but also provide for resiliency and long-term stability. And also, speaking of diversity, we have some plants left over here for those of you in the room for our plants by donation. Don't do it now, but after our featured speaker is done tonight, if you are looking for some new plants, we have some really interesting ones over there at our plants by donation table. Okay, we have a few announcements. One from the state. They have posted the 2024 annual report online. It's got this beautiful cover. You can see that ruby-throated hummingbird feeding on a native Texas thistle. Not a weed, but an amazing native wildflower. And it's full of a lot of really important information about different chapters and also the financials and everything like that. We were highlighted as part of the impact for education. And you can see here, we were highlighted for our educational signage. And I don't know if Judith is here tonight, but Judith Ballou designed this beautiful poster for us as part of our NICE Native Plant Partner program. And we created these signs for our 2 native plant partners. And if we get any more, we'll give them signs as well. But they highlight 12 of our native plants that are really rock stars in the landscape and easy to grow. And you can see in this image, Donald and Melanie Gerber, who are the owners of Pollinators Nursery in Converse, holding up that sign. So Judith has given a lot of her time and talent for a number of our promotional materials for the chapter, and we're really thankful for what she's done for us. As a reminder, our grant program opened up recently, and we've got 3 different types of grants. The standard grant for up to $500, the grower grant for up to $500, and micro grants of $50. And if you go to our website, you can see all of the requirements and details associated with each of those grants. And as a reminder, our native plant partners are listed here. So I already mentioned Pollinators at 101 South Street, Converse, and the Nectar Bar at 7600 Effort Road. These native plant partners carry a wide variety of native plants. I've been to both nurseries recently and was just amazed at the unique species that each one of them carries. These are plants that you're not going to find anywhere else. And it's not the greatest time right now to plant a lot of things, but there are some things that you can plant right now. If you have a water garden or a pond type environment, aquatic plants can be planted right now. And each of these nurseries carries really interesting native aquatic plants. And then also some of our more arid species, West Texas, South Texas species can also be planted now. So each of these nurseries has knowledgeable people there to help you with your site and help you pick out the right plants for the right place and the right time. All right, this Saturday is the Go Native Natives for Your Landscape with Joan Miller, who's in the room, and Drake White of the Nectar Bar. This is going to be here at the Urban Ecology Center, first meeting in the classroom, which is right outside of this building, from 8 to 10. And they're going to be highlighting a lot of the plants that are around this building in the landscape, as well as within the Alamo Area Master Naturalist Demonstration Garden, that's just a short walk away. These are plants that are really great and ornamental, native of course, that you might find are good for your site conditions to add to your garden if you don't already have them. Oh, and also we'll be handing out some seed packets of our pollinator plant of the year at that event too. And we'd like to thank all the volunteers that helped us at Confluence Park with the pollinator tea party at the end of May. It was a really fun event. I see some of the volunteers here. We had a table, we gave education about native plants and talked about our organization, and we also gave away some of our seed packets of the pollinator plant of the year. It was a really fun event. And if you remember, you should have received an email about an event that we were holding at the Botanical Garden, a tour. It's filled up from what I understand, but the Botanical Garden is offering any of our members a 30% discount on membership to the garden if you're interested. And if you didn't get that email, or you're a new member and you need that code, just let us know and we will give you the code for that discount. And we'd like to thank the Botanical Garden for offering that. Save the date, Pollinatives is going to have a plant sale benefiting our chapter in October on October 25th. More details to come. And our next chapter meeting is July 22nd. We'll have Marissa Bruno, who is the Water Program Manager for Hill Country Alliance. And she'll be talking about how to work with developers and homeowners associations on native and water-wise landscapes. And tonight we're really excited to have Brice Moczygemba, and he's going to talk about the Moczygemba Rewild Ranch and their journey restoring Prairie on that. So bear with us as we transition from this presentation to Brice's. And then we'll be making sure that. Perfect, thanks, Brice.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for.
You might want to hit the OK button on your screen.
Recording. Yeah, good point at the top. Thank you.
There you go.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Brice Moczygemba. I'm a proud member of the Native Plant Society of Texas, the San Antonio branch, and all the wonderful things y'all have done for me over the years. Not a well-kept secret. So my goal tonight was the goal of, I guess, Mr. Kirchhoff's a few years ago, is if I get one person or one property owner or family or someone on Zoom to go out and rewild their property, then my presentation tonight will be all well worth it. So that's my goal tonight. So brief outline, I'm going to go through and discuss the problem, introduction of myself and the project, my introduction to conservation, habitat restoration, learning about the tallgrass prairie grasses, researching how to prepare a property for a restoration, getting started. Finally, it's time to plant our first year of growth, seeing success, final project cost, and a thank you to all the people that have helped me. So I just wanted to start by Sorry, it got cut off. But the problem, you know, today we read articles in Texas Monthly, the Native Plant Society, and other publications, and we think about the destruction of habitat. And you know, I was several years ago, I saw a presentation and they referenced this report. And this is a report by an agronomist who lived in Abilene, Texas in the late 1800s. And in 1898, 127 years ago, he filed his report with the USDA. And in his report, he documents that in a 14-year period, the tallgrass prairie in a 20,000 square mile area centered on Abilene, Texas, had been destroyed. This was 1898. You're not reading it in today's newspaper, Texas Monthly. And he says the grasses were entirely consumed. Their very roots were trampled into dust and destroyed. In their eagerness to get something for nothing, speculators did not hesitate at the permanent injury, if not the total ruin of the finest grazing country in America. He went on to state, and this is it's great to read this report. From that day to the present, but little intelligent effort has been made to improve the pastures and again cover them with the rich vegetation which the soil is capable of supporting. It is not yet too late to remedy the evil, but no time is to be lost. So here we are, over 125 years later, and thank goodness to Parks and Wildlife and other groups that have programs that I was in that are going back to the native, you know, to the property owners, and hopefully doing our best to restore what has been lost. So, an introduction. I retired in December of 2017 after a 30-year career as a civil engineer and principal at Pate Dawson Engineers here in San Antonio. And I'd always been interested in the outdoors. As a kid growing up, I spent my summers with my grandparents on their farm in southeastern Wilson County. And it all started with my great-grandfather purchased the first 125 acres in 1917 and later gifted it to my grandfather after he got married to my grandmother in 1934. And then the property that I manage, my grandfather purchased an adjacent 100 acres in 1944, of which my father inherited 50 acres after my grandfather's death in 1986. When I retired, I knew I needed to spend more time on the property and clean it up because my father had passed away in 2008. Clean it up. I had no interest in cattle. I had no interest in leasing it out for other people. The people that had been grazing there for years just overgrazed it to dirt. And since we hadn't farmed it in 20 plus years, the mesquites had come up. You know, we had 12 to 15 foot mesquites all over the property. I'd been a member of the Native Plant Society for several years before I retired, but I didn't attend many meetings because I was just busy all the time. I was a workaholic and I didn't get to do much. And but now that I retired, I made a point to attend monthly meetings. For years, I'd seen presentations about pollinator gardens and native residential landscape and conservation to reduce water consumption and add pollinators, but I always thought, well, maybe I could make a difference on something bigger. And, you know, this may be offensive, but I put it in anyway. I wanted to do it on a larger scale project and really put my money where my mouth is. You know, I can sit here and lecture all day and talk about how good it is, but I had the opportunity to go back and rewild something. Okay. So look at this beautiful lady. I know most of you all know her. So a friend and former president of the San Antonio chapter of the Native Plant Society, Teresa Maslanka, I went to her house in the spring of 2018. I went to drop something off to Robert, and she gave me a catalog. This isn't it, unfortunately, but this is Native American seed. She said, Brice, here's a great catalog. I have an extra one. Would you like it? And I go, yeah, this is great. And she's a lover of native landscapes and native plants. And if you've ever seen her yard, it's just amazing. And it just really blew me away. And I was fascinated. And just like a kid for the older people, you had the Sears and Roebuck catalog, you know, you'd look at it through Christmas and you'd look at it all year. Oh my God, this is what I want for Christmas. Well, I just fell in love with all these plants and all these grasses, you know, and I spent hours and hours looking at this seed catalog. And so during COVID, the Native Plant Society started doing online Zoom meetings. We didn't meet in public. And so on March 23rd, 2021, the meeting, there was a presentation by a gentleman named Don Kirchhoff. And it was about the history of his family's restoration of a 200-acre family property just to the west of Poth, Texas and Wilson County. And I thought, wow, this is really neat. And you know, it's probably 17 miles as the bird flies west of where I'm located. And Don is such a great guy. And so that evening, you know, he had his email address and phone number. And so the next day evening, I called him up and talked. And Don then introduced me to his Texas Parks and Wildlife Pastures for Upland Birds program and described it. And what was great about Don in his presentation, he talked about how, you know, they went out on their own at first. They had 200 acres. They bought all this seed. They used typical seed drills like you'd seed corn or milo with, and it completely failed. Completely failed. Thousands of dollars just down the drain. And so that's when he did his research, got with Parks and Wildlife, Texas Parks and Wildlife, and got into the PUD program and went from there. So Don has been a great resource. And it got chopped off here, but the Pastures for Upland Birds program by Texas Parks and Wildlife, it provides a cost-sharing incentives and technical guidance to private property owners to restore native grasses and forest vegetation on pastures and hayfields 25 acres or greater, dominated by exotic grasses such as Bermuda grass, Bahia grass, Old World bluestem. And a lot of the funding comes through the state and also through U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And the whole goal of the program is to reestablish grassland bird conservation, upland birds, okay? Because habitat is disappearing. When you drive and you see these beautiful coastal fields, if you're a bird, number one, it's a food desert. And number two, if you have quail or young chicks, they can't maneuver through it. So you're wondering why bird populations are decreasing, and it's because of destruction of habitat. So Texas Parks and Wildlife, once you get into the program, they provide you with all the herbicides you need, the native grass and forage seed mixes, technical guidance, and then they loan out to you a no-till drill so that you can plant it. What the owner is expected to provide is labor associated with any pre-treatments, herbicide treatments, native seed, plantings, supplemental treatments, so on. So the nice thing is that Texas Parks and Wildlife, they provide biologists with extensive experience of native prairie restorations and have identified over 40 native species of plants for seeding PUD projects. How do landowners participate? First, you contact your local Texas Parks and Wildlife biologist and you ask them, you just let them know you're interested. You then schedule an appointment. They come out and walk the property with you. They work with you to prepare your project proposal for submittal. You submit to Texas Parks and Wildlife. You implement, they approve it, you implement the plan, and then you monitor your progress. And you're basically not under an official contract, but you are to maintain your project for a minimum of 10 years. So during the spring of 2021, I began researching the Texas Parks and Wildlife PUD program. I did all the reading I could, and YouTube is just amazing, and tried to do as much research as I could. And then on Friday, May 14th, 2021, I met and walked the property with Ty Hickenbottom and Amber Brown with Oaks and Prairie joint venture to see if they thought the property had any potential. And they gave me a lot of positive feedback. And on May 18th, this is what's really amazing. So on May 18th, 2021, EOG Resource Resources, who's our oil producer in the area. The landman, Platt Glasscock, who's a fine gentleman, he actually called me up on the phone. He said, "Hey, Brice, EOG Resources has a program where we're trying to re-establish 350 acres of prairie restoration within the Eagle Ford Shale of South Texas. And we're a partner along with EOG. We're EOG, Texan by Nature, and Texas Parks and Wildlife have this program, and we're a sponsor. We're looking for landowners because, face it, most landowners are not interested. If you've got a grazing operation, you just don't have the interest. All you want to do is graze, and that's it. So this was just an out of the blue blessing. And went the wrong way. Sorry. And here was a brochure they actually had at the time, because again, Barbara Bush, when she left the White House, she established Texan by Nature, and they were one of the sponsors, and they had this wonderful program. So I said, you bet. So then I took my first tour of the Kirchhoff Prairie on June 1st, 2021, and I fell in love with Don's conservation efforts. Don's a warm and caring guy, and he's an excellent teacher and conservationist. Hopefully many of y'all have spent time with him and on his property. And on June 3rd, 2021, I met with EOG, Texan by Nature, and Texas Parks and Wildlife. They came out, we met, and I was hooked. And it's like, guys, let's go, let's restore the property. So on June 21st, Jamie Killian came out. She was the Texas Parks and Wildlife biologist. She came out to the property, walked it with me, and then got me started on my application. And then the pub application was approved on October 12th, 2021. So I needed to get to a point where I wanted to take my time and do it right. So in the meantime, I wanted to learn the growing habit of the different grasses, so I could know what to expect. And so in the Native American Seed Catalog, in the very back, the back few pages, they have something called live roots. So I went out and I bought little big blue stem switchgrass and Indian grass. And I started to chop out an area that was behind hog fence, so the hogs wouldn't come and tear it up. And I just dug out an area. I ordered my bare roots and I planted them in. And so shortly, so there's my grass test plot. And I ended up planting big blue stem switchgrass and Indian grass. And then later I added little blue stem and Engelmann daisy plants that I dug up along the county roads around the property. Didn't get arrested. And then later on I went and I added eastern gamma grass, Alamo switchgrass, and a few others that I can't read here. But it's interesting, the eastern gamma grass, I used to walk during COVID, like several miles a day, and I'd always look around and I noticed that on Blanco Road, just north of Bitters on the west side, Saws had a slow water leak. And there was this huge group of eastern gamma grass that was growing, and it was beautiful. And so one day I stopped on the side of the road and I got my sharpshooter out and some cattle supplement tubs, and I dug up a bunch of plants. Luckily, because a year later, Saws repaired the main and dug it all out and killed it all. So anyway, and so I have that in my test plot. And so now I'm researching, how do I get started? And one of the first things I learned from Don's presentation and subsequent conversations and site visits was that there's a right way and a wrong way to start a restoration project. Because keep in mind, we're not going out and we're not solarizing the area to get rid of the weeds. We're dealing with 35 acres in my case, where we have to try to do our best. So what he taught me, you need to do thorough research before you get started. This was done. You must be patient. Don't rush it. And you can't rush the process. So I spent hours visiting and speaking with as many people as possible who had experience in doing restoration projects, including Don Kirchhoff, Robert and Melinda Creech in Wilson County, Dr. Tony Falk, who's the director of the Texas Native Seed Program at the Cesar Claiborne Wildlife Institute at Texas A&M Kingsville. Awesome guy. If there's any big donors in the room, please donate to the Texas Native Seed Program. He and his staff and students go across the state of Texas collecting native seeds, forbs, and grasses. They then grow them in greenhouses and they get the most dominant groups of seedlings that they can find. They plant it, and then eventually they go out and they license it to commercial growers. And that's how Douglas King and others get these seeds that in many cases, you know, before they started, 20 years from now, a lot of them could have been extinct in Texas. Ty Hickenbottom and Amber Brown, who I mentioned earlier. The late Gary Koshurik with the Fayette Prairie chapter of the Native Prairies Association of Texas. And then all the helpful biologists with Parks and Wildlife that helped me. Jamie Killian, Blaise Kerjekfa, Rachel Hamilton, Tim Zigman, who's the leader of the PUD program in Texas, Colin Simpson. And then another great resource that many of y'all may know is Forrest Smith with Douglas King Seed here in San Antonio. Awesome resource, awesome guy too. So one of the great things when I was visiting with Dr. Tony Falk, he recommended that I take a 5-hour online course titled Native Seeding Certification. It's put out by the Texas A&M AgriLife Center, and it was authored by Dr. Tony Falk and Dr. Megan Clayton, who she's really awesome too. One of the interesting things, and unfortunately this got cut off, but when I was dealing with Gary Koshurik, he gave me this, it was just really a flyer of an unpublished presentation, unpublished research that was put together by, I can't see his last name, Matt Kashodik, I believe, with the USDA NRCS. And they did a research program on how best to prepare a large-scale project in order to get rid of your invasives, okay? Which I'm talking about Old World Bluestem, Coastal Bermuda, and others. And so they did a research project where they took multiple plots and they did 8 different methods over a 1-year and a 2-year period. They did mechanical disking only, mechanical disking and herbicide spraying, mechanical disking and warm season cropping, cool season and cropping and herbicide, double cropping, herbicide spray only, cool season burn only, and cool season burn and herbicide spraying. And here's a breakdown of their cost per acre on their program and the different methods. But what was interesting, this came at a good time for me, because if you look at this study, the study found the most successful method to suppress Old World bluestems prior to planting was mechanical disking and herbicide spraying treatments over a 2-year period. And you can see from this graph, the green line is the percent of natives that have come up. The blue line represents the Old World bluestem percents based on the different treatment. And then the black graph, the black line, is the cost per acre. But as you can see, under mechanical disking and spraying over a 2-year period, it basically was, they weren't even able to measure the percentage of the Old World bluestem that came up after this 2-year treatment regimen. And I know a lot of people, they just want to go out and burn. They'll do a 1-year burn, and that's the column to the far right. And you can see that it had over a 90% reoccurrence of the Old World bluestem, because keep in mind, when you burn Old World bluestems, it's just like fertilizing them and watering with nitrogen. They go crazy. And you can see that the planted natives didn't even show up. They were like 0. So this was so helpful, and it reinforced the path that I was going down. And so the first thing that I needed to do, these are before pictures, was eradicate the mesquite that had overgrown the property from 20 years of being former cropland and being overgrazed. And I contacted a group of individuals who are not related to me directly, Richard and Dennis Moczygemba with J&J Farms and Agribusiness, and I invited them out. I said, hey, give me a quote to spray these mesquites, because I want to get rid of these mesquites. And they just laughed at me and they said, look, Brice, you can't afford it. You just cannot afford it. And they suggested that we mulch and shred the mesquites down, followed by root plowing the property to kill the mesquites. They said this would save time and money in the long run, and they were right. And so you can see this machine here. This is about a 5'5" individual standing there. So this is a 12 to 13 foot shredder that came out the first time. And you can see on the left side, there's a row of mesquites that he's shredding down. And that's what we did on we started on June 30th, 2020. And we just shred all the mesquite down. And this is seeing is believing. It was fun to watch. And my uncle called me up. He said, Brice, that mesquite is mad as hell now. It's just gonna go crazy. And so anyway, it was cool. Anyway, and then we began root plowing and the mulch and shredded mesquite on November 2nd, 2021. So they brought their dozers and their tractors. And what's interesting to see is the two pictures on the right-hand side. You know, we talk about root plowing. So you have these mesquites, and I may use the wrong word, but they have a bulb underground. And this second picture from the right, it's actually upside down. And what you're seeing, it's upside down. The root, the tap root is sticking up and it has been sliced off. And all these horizontal roots are, I guess, what's really nourishing the plant. Again, I don't know. But the theory behind root plowing is you take this blade 12 to 14 inches below ground, drag it, and you cut them below the bulb, and you cut that taproot, and they're not going to come back. So they had their bulldozer, and they also had a smaller one based on the tractor, and you can just see it. So we root plowed the entire 35 acres. And all these mesquite stumps just popped up. You can see he would just hit one and it would drag, and you just keep on going. And then here's my son and daughter-in-law, and we spent many hours out there picking up and burning all these mesquite stumps. Then later, the next step after we root plowed is we came out and disked the property. We disked the entire property up to 5 times over a 19-month period from November 21st through November of 2021 through June of 2023. And in this photo, you can see this particular area, we had a very healthy stand of coastal Bermuda. You know, if a rancher was driving by, they would have really called the cops on me for tearing all this property up. But you can see this was in the spring. We had a beautiful crop of coastal, but we had to get it and just rip it all out. But notice you went from a thick lawn type setting of coastal Bermuda, which is really beautiful, that we disked it all under. And then if you had old world blue stems, you know, it's a bunch grass. So once you take that big KR blue stem and you turn it over and expose those roots, you're going to kill it. You're going to get probably a 90–95% kill. And keep in mind, we did this was the first disking of this area here, but this area later was disked a total of 5 times. Okay, and then we sprayed a total of 5 times over a 10-month period from April 2023 through February 2024. And I have a series of pictures across the property. I have 10 photo points that I go to 3 times a year. And instead of taking pictures, I learned that you go there with your camera and you just do a 360-degree, you just go in a circle, do a 300-degree circle in the same direction, and then you can do screenshots. So you can get that lined up perfectly to see progression over time. And so as you can see what we started with in June of 2020 until June of 2023, 3 years later, And you can see the mesquites at one point sprouted out. This was early on. Then we replowed them, we disked it. And you can see in April 6, 2023, we had a lot of growth. We then sprayed it. That little circle in the middle is the area where we had a lot of stumps that we had to burn. And then on June 8th, 2023, we were pretty much disking it because we were letting the soil firm up so that we could plant in the spring. And our spraying regimen, for example, when we were spraying the coastal Bermuda, we were spraying at 3 quarts per acre. I mean, we were nuking that baby. You know, you had to kill those. There's no forgiving. You live a few sprigs of coastal, and in a short period of time, it'll take over, you know, several hundred square foot area. And then we have problems with an invasive species, bird clover in the winter. If you had a wet winter, the bird clover could easily get, 8 to 12 inches tall. And so we just wanted to get rid of that. So we would spray that at 1.1 pints per acre. And these are just other photo points that you can see over time. And then finally, after 42 months of work, it was February 14th, Valentine's Day 2024. And the really cool thing, it was just a few weeks after the 80th anniversary of this property being purchased by my grandfather. And put it this way, it was definitely an emotional moment, taking a property back to its native pre-European condition. So here we are, this seed drill again, the no-till drill was brought out of College Station, Texas. And Richard and Dennis came out that morning. We loaded up and they planted up and through the evening. I mean, they were planting in the dark. It was awesome. Whoop. So this no-till drill, like I said, back in June of 2023, we just had to let the soil compact because we've been disking it heavily. If you've ever walked on a disc area, it's just clods and it's real rough and you can't plant into it. So we let, what few rains we had to let the rain settle the dirt down. And then we would plant the maximum of 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. And when you walked behind this drill, you'd actually see bare seed on the top of the soil because a lot of these species have to, germinate just by laying on top of the soil. Okay, and here it's hard to see, but the Texas Parks and Wildlife, they provided me with the seed mix. It contained 20 native Texas grasses and 20 native Texas forbs, and you can see them everything from big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grasses, love grass, white tridents, which is one of my favorite grasses, because these grasses you just don't see. Windmill grass, just wonderful grasses, and then all these forbs that are just beautiful too. So this was just over a month later after we planted, and you can see this was the green springle top grasses coming in. You can see partridge peas coming in, and the early succession grasses were really coming in quickly. And then by mid-April and late May, you can see that we have some beautiful forbs, the scarlet sage, the partridge pea, clammy weed, lemon mint, black-eyed Susans, Mexican hat, Plains coreopsis. It came back this year, but the grasshoppers defoliated the Plains coreopsis. It was so sad. Anyway, by May 27th of 2024, from February to May 27th, this is what we had achieved. You talk about beautiful, talk about pollinators, you talk about habitat. This is what it's about, guys. And this is a great picture. This is at a property line, okay? And I do a 180-degree view. This was last summer. So you take your pick, food desert or food wildlife banquet. Take your pick. What do you want? what do you want to leave to your children, your grandchildren? It's pretty obvious to me. And then seeing success, birds, birds, and more birds. So here are some of the birds. And when I was doing this, to be totally honest, for 2 to 3 years, all I was worried about, all I was focused about was growing grass and forbs. That's all I thought about. But once it started to grow out last summer, it's like, let's get back to what this is all about. It's about habitat restoration. Build it, they will come. And that's what happened. And so now that's my focus. I can walk 50 acres for hours. It's crazy. No one else would do it, but I just love it. And on April 8th of this year, once I got into seeing the birds, I joined the Bear Audubon Society. Patsy and Tom England, I met them at Confluence Park during October of last year, and we talked. And they said, hey, we can do a bird survey for you. So I joined them. They came out on April 8th and they identified 33 bird species. And that little guy in the corner back in December, I had a burrowing owl come and join our property. People didn't believe me until I was able to photograph it and show people. Hey, we have a burrowing owl. I guess he didn't find a girlfriend, so he left in March. But he was so cool. And then in addition to the 33 species that they identified on that morning walk, I've documented 13 additional species, including that burrowing owl. I hope he comes back. And it was interesting because he was just in a fence line where the armadillos or the badgers would dig burrows. And that's what made him happy. It was so cute. And then seeing success with all the different animals that are out there now. Game cameras are the best thing in the world. Like I set a game camera out one time and there's a badger. That badger was on our property. It was 9:30 in the morning and a badger just took 3 photos going across the game camera. And then, so here's a progression of photos from when we started in 2020 until October of last year. You can see the mesquite, you can see the shredding, you can see the post disking, the spraying, disking again, spraying again. And then you see on April 22nd of 2024, that's when we planted, just 2 months after we planted. You can see July of last summer. You can see a lot of native grasses. You can see the Maximilian sunflowers, which were everywhere. But unfortunately, we are in South Texas, and then October 12th, this is what you saw, and it's heartbreaking. And as a property owner, you go, oh my God, I went to all this effort, and it's all just going to die, And if you're a Christian, you pray a lot, okay? And I pray a lot. And I was wondering who the bad guy was out there that it didn't rain. It must have been me. But anyway, here's some more before and after progression pictures. And then hopefully you can see this. But I wanted to itemize for anyone that's interested. I documented all my costs. So the gross cost for 35 acres was $26,272. Outside assistance, which consists of products from, that were supplied by Texas Parks and Wildlife, and then also the reimbursements that EOG, our oil producer, provided me, totaled $11,800. So the net to me was $14,000, and as you can see, it was such a blessing that the seed, the herbicides, and others, and the reimbursement was 45% of my costs were reimbursed to me, and then 55% was out of pocket. So just for informational purposes, it was $750 per acre, but out of pocket, it was $411. So here's a good sign. This is the sun. And I went out there 2 weeks ago and I took some pictures of what it looked like over the last round of rains that we had recently. Over a 2-week period, we had 4 rains totaling just under 6 inches of rain, and it just came to life. Things that I thought maybe were dead just came to life. On the left, you see Indian grass. In the center, you see Eastern gamma grass, courtesy of Blanco Road and Saws Leak and Water Main. And then on the top right-hand corner, that's just a view across. What you're really seeing there, you're seeing a lot of side oats, grama. You're seeing a lot of green springle top. You're seeing a lot of small little blue stem. And there's a lot of white tridents in there too. And it's just beautiful. Then here's some pictures because I know people here like clammy weed. Here's some clammy weed that came out after the rains. And then in the center here, of all things, we don't have Linheimer senna in our area. And so back in 2023, in the fall, I went up and down Salado Creek with a brown paper bag and I collected seed heads. So one was the 7-acre tracts that we had. When the seed drill got there and we were loading it up with seed, I got my paper bag and I started sprinkling the seed in there. And be dang, it took. And so this is a recent picture. And it was pretty last fall, because last fall it was primarily brown, nothing was blooming. And the one thing, you looked across the field and you saw those sennas and they had yellow blooms and you could just pick them out. You could have just sat there and counted them all in that field. And it was just beautiful for the pollinators. On the top, you see a cut off Maximilian that just actually was starting to bloom, and you see some bristlegrass in the lower right-hand corner. And then we were blessed back in May. I was out there in May one day, and I took a video of this mama fox. She didn't see me, and I was upwind of her. And I took like a 20-second video of her walking toward me, and I was behind an oak tree. And she was big, had a belly and nipples, and I figured she must gonna have pups. And so she had pups, and you can see the 5 pups here. And they made their den underneath the shed. And they were just so beautiful. I went out there, set my camera thinking, well, maybe something's here. And the first time I checked it 3 days later, there were like 1,000 photos because those little pups had come out there all night long. It was just so cool. And one of the photos, the mom brought a baby cottontail to feed him. And then one others, there's a pack rat that she brought him to feed him at night. It's just awesome. And then a few weeks ago, the mom and dad arrived. I have pictures of them. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, they took them away. And this is a cute picture. You know, now we have quail season, and this is a little blurry. This is a game camera. And again, this whole project is for habitats for upland birds. And so in the fall, I had a game feeder, and I had one picture where I had 15 adult quail just around one feeder in one little area. And this one, here's a mom and dad recently, about 3 weeks ago, and she has with her 5 little chicks. And that's just what it's all about, guys. It's all about. So 2 weeks ago, Tim Zigman asked if he could come out, and he's with Texas Parks and Wildlife. He's the coordinator of this PUD program across the state. And he said, we'd like to come out and invite the local Parks and Wildlife biologist in our area and do a training course. So he said, could we come out? And in the center, many of y'all recognize Don Kirchhoff. And then Daniel Doogie is a property owner just south of Stockdale that we visited all 3 properties. There's my wife, Teresa, holding the sign on the right-hand side next to me. So we spent the whole day visiting the properties, training these new biologists, young biologists, how to interact with property owners, what to see, the different stages. And guys, it's just worth it. And I love signs, and I have one of our signs on our fence too. So I just want to get back to what H.L. Bentley said in 1898. From that day to the present day, but little intelligent effort has been made to improve the pastures and again cover them with a rich vegetation which the soil is capable of supporting. It is not too late to remedy the evil, but no time is to be lost. So thank God, 127 years later, I'm here to say you can do it. Please join me. And this is just a slide for the thank you to all the people, starting with Teresa here. So if you have a spare catalog in your home, Give it to your neighbor, give it to your kid, hand it out, bring them to the meetings, okay? And all the people that have helped me, and here's my contact information if anyone's interested. Thank you, and any questions?
Right. So for that 2 years of scorched earth process. Did you have a lot of soil runoff or did you have to put up silt control on the property edges?
And
The question was, in the 2 years of scorched earth that we went through, did we have a lot of soil runoff? And we really didn't. The property is pretty flat, plus we're terraced. Okay, our property is terraced, so you don't get a lot of runoff. And the one thing too, unfortunately, we had some dry years. You know, when we would disc, that soil would just suck up the water, seriously, because we didn't, you know, in 23 and 24, well, 2022, 2023, we didn't have much rains. I think 2022, we had 11 inches the entire year. We couldn't even grow Johnson grass to spray, you know? So, no, we didn't. Yes, sir.
What rainfall, you know, you have to germinate seeds, so it looks like you, 2024, you had the spring rain that helped the germination, right? 'Cause
Yes.
that's a very important fact.
Yes,
I grew up on the farm and I know
yes,
no rain, no germination.
yes. In fact, the question was, did you have rains to help with the germination? You know, the blessing we had, that December, I think we had a 6-inch rain in December 23, something like that. We had a large rain, and so we had some good moisture, which we'd been lacking. So when February came around, we, you know, you could see you had white crusty surface, which was really a perfect surface to plant into. And then we did have some rains last spring. You know, it really didn't shut off. We had a wet year until June of last year. And then it just shut off in June and July of last year. So we were good, we were blessed because Mr. Daniel Doogie, who just did plant it this spring outside of Stockdale, when we had the 5 inches, he had 3/10. So when we walked his property, you know, it was sort of sad because he didn't have a lot that had come up. And you saw my May picture where we had everything in bloom just in a few months. So we were blessed in 2024.
what did you use for the herbicide?
We used Roundup. We had, you know, but the reality is, you have to nuke it. When you're doing, you cannot, you know, because I've seen properties where people say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do a controlled burn and I'm going to plant. I saw a neighboring property where they disked one time, they sprayed one time, and I came out a year later and I almost cried because I said it was 95% KR blue stem. Amber waves of grain, that's what it looked like, okay? It was an 80-acre piece of property. And I almost cried because I said, this was the year before I planted. I said, if that's my result, I'm just going to give up. But I can tell you, you can walk my property, and I don't think, my son and I drove it the other day, you know, on one of the 17-acre pieces we saw, I chopped out 2 KR blue stems. So we were successful. Now on the perimeter, you know, and fence lines and stuff, you know, we have to go in there and we need to spray it again because there are some. What I do along we have public county roads there, and of course the KR goes there. So every time it rains and it comes out, right when it heads out, we shred it. We shred both sides so it doesn't blow into the property. And there are a few areas that we have some volunteer coastal, and I really wanted to spray it after this rain, but I really need to get with the biologist because I have so many young quail. And I don't want these 3-week quail walking through areas with, you know, that we spray Roundup in the morning on. So I think I'll wait later into the fall, but you have to destroy that area. It will take over.
So You had a list of wildlife and birds inventory of what you had after the restoration. What was it like before?
You know, to be honest, when you're not a conservationist, you don't know what the hell's there. You know, I'm serious. For example, I'm 64 years old, 63 last year. I've never seen a painted bunting in my life. Okay. And I have some, because I'm in conservation, I put out these molasses tubs and fill them with water to keep for the wildlife. And I started noticing painted buntings. And I go, wow, this is really cool. And so, I've learned what I've been missing. And that's why when I learned about the Audubon and I started looking at birds and hearing birds and the Cornell app that's out there, I just sort of changed, people can change. I was a land developer. Last month's presentation, some of those slides were my subdivisions that I designed,
Right.
So things turn.
We've got a question on Zoom if you're
Sure.
ready for another question. Can you talk about the impact to the soil health of multiple seasons of disking and spraying? Does it impact the mycorrhizal health?
You know what's really interesting? I'm sure it does. But again, it's a balance. Every quarter, it's really interesting. Texas A&M AgriLife, in partnership with USDA and Texas Parks and Wildlife, they have a program that's called, and it was last week. Anyway, they have this hour-and-a-half Zoom meeting, and each presenter has 15 minutes to present something. The last plant party, it's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you. And last week it was about soils, and they were talking about the microbiome and such in the soil. And I always like to stick around after it's finished and listen to what the people who put Tim Zigman and others, what they're talking about. And so Tim Zigman asked one of the presenters, who she had done her research on soil, was about phosphorus. He says, we were doing projects in the Texas Panhandle, and we planted some projects and they were complete failures. And the reason they were complete failures is because we soil tested it and the phosphorus levels were below 15. And does that have any impact? And she started talking, she says, yes, these soils have been, farming. You talk about microbiome, but just the farming zaps the nutrients over time, increases, or decreases the pH and such. So they kept talking. And she says, yeah, especially in the Texas Panhandle, you have areas that are, because of the cotton and such over the years, they've just been mined of their phosphorus. And so, yes, if you were to add some. So I sent Tim an email with my soil test from 2 years ago, and my phosphorus levels were 13, 11, and 9. So I was just happy that I even had growth, because I have some 2 areas that have if you look at the soil survey, 2 extreme areas that have the same soil type, and the grasses didn't do as well. So anyway, I emailed Tim and I said, hey, should I apply some superphosphate onto my property to get these values up, to get these grasses primed and ready to go? And he'd just been to our property 2 weeks ago. He says, you can do it as a test if you want, take a small area and do a test and see what happens. But what he brought to me is that, keep in mind, these grasses are going to, a lot of these grasses, at the minimum, they're going to have 2-foot roots, and most of them will have 10-foot roots, these little blue stems and such. And he said that they will draw that phosphorus and other nitrates from the subsoil and bring them up. And what's interesting, he said, take your samples in September as you did 2 years ago. And he said, I bet you just your grass growth has increased your phosphorus levels. So that's one thing I'm going to do. Another thing that I want to do a test on here soon, and I'd love to have some college students help me. I take pride that we, even after 2 years of scorched earth, and I saw these poor harvester ant mounds had nothing to eat, but they just prospered. Now that we have grass, oh my God, these ants are so happy. But have you ever looked at one of their nests? So just do a radius and go from the center of that net, that harvester ant, everybody knows red ants, right? Go away. My healthiest grass stands are on the perimeter of that ring. And it's because of all the micronutrients that they've brought in and has decomposed over the years that they brought in from the bacteria that they feed off of. You know, and I'm tempted to do soil tests like every 6 inches on a radius going out from them on several of those nests and see what the nutrient levels are. So thank you for the question.
Brice, you had talked about quail on the property. Are you hunting or is the state hunting? Oh,
I'm not a hunter. There's plenty to go around, so they don't need me. You know, I'm in an area, you know, where growing up, I never saw a wild turkey in my life. My parents never did. You never saw a deer. There was no such thing as deer. Now you have wild turkey, you have turkey feeders out there. There were quail, but keep in mind the quail populations have pretty much crashed across the state because of the KR bluestem and the invasion of these invasive grasses. If you go to the Rio Grande Valley, what are you going to see? You're going to see 90% coverage of guinea grass under mesquites. Okay, there's no way grass, you know, upland birds can survive in a habitat like that. So I'm giving the quail every opportunity to thrive. Yes.
How are you managing to manage the property? Are you, in terms of, are you going to do any shredding or things to get the carbon back in the soils? What are you, how are you gonna manage the problem in the long run?
You know, on my research,
Question, sorry,
the
Brice.
question is, how am I going to manage the property to get the carbon back into the soils and such? Thank you for that question. You know, it's one of those things that you're nervous about, but when I was doing my research and Colin Simpson with Parks and Wildlife, when he visited 2 weeks ago, said, Brice, next year I'm going to work with you and we need to graze this property. Okay, we need to graze it. But through the research, you really need to let it go 3 years. Because again, you've got early, mid, and late succession grasses. I mean, for example, the grasses that came up immediately were the green springletop. And what is green springletop? Which is from Van Horn, Texas, in West Texas. But in 2 to 3 years, it slowly disappears and goes away. And then your mid and late succession grasses come in. Like I was concerned that we had no little blue stem. And when Tim and Colin came out 2 weeks ago, they were looking around because I made them nervous. And I said, guys, there's no little blue stem. And I know it grows well here. Was it because of the type we planted? And they started looking around and they kept pulling those stems off that had the flat stem. And they were happy. And now I see it everywhere. The rain has helped it to grow back. So this fall, we'll be seeing it head out. So it's going to be primarily grazing, limited grazing, which will open up, you know, and give bare areas for the wildlife and the quail, and also get the carbon back into the ground. Yes, sir.
You've got harvester ants. Any chance you seeing any horned lizards?
I would love to. You know, we're not that full. Probably what 15 miles as the crow flies from Corn City, where it's one of the thriving populations.
Repeat the question, please, again.
Yes, with the
Sorry.
harvester ants, do I hold out any hope that I can see horned lizards? I do, and you know, to be honest, last fall I was at a conservation conference in Pleasanton, and I just so happened to sit at the table with a young lady who works at the program at the zoo in that program. So I have to look it up on my phone now, sorry. But get with me afterwards. And you know, I'd like to get them out there. The thing is, when you have 50 acres, sometimes they're a little bit hesitant, you know. But I do keep looking for scat on the nest to see if I see the scat. But you know, the most interesting thing that I see on those harvester ant mounds, you're almost always going to see Inca and ground doves. And I'm curious, I'm gonna set a game camera there sometime to see if they're stealing the seed from the ants. No, I'm kidding. You know, do they feed off the grass seed from the ants?
Bryce, there's another question on Zoom, and if you would repeat it for the Zoom audience, are wild pigs an issue?
Wild pigs. Are wild pigs an issue? One of the tracts that we have is a 15-acre tract. And in the fall of 2023, and I'm not joking, you could take 3 steps and be in a hole. 15 acres was covered with wild hog hollows because it had rained. It was, we had been disking it, it had rained, and the wild onions or rain lilies, whatever you call them, they just had a feast. 15 acres of nothing but hog rooting. I couldn't believe it. My wife said, Brice, you know what? You're investing a lot of your time and money and resources and everything into this property, and you're going to lose it. You're going to lose it all. It's all going to be destroyed. And so I got with Richard and Dennis, and we hog fenced the perimeter, and it controlled the hogs. Hog fence your property. Deer can get through it, over it. Yes, sir.
When you seeded it initially, did you have a problem with birds eating the seed just laying on top?
No, we really didn't. But
Repeat the question again.
Oh, when we seeded, did we have problems with birds eating the seed? You know, to be honest, we seeded it heavily, very heavily. I mean, when you're walking behind that drill, not only was it in the ground, but it was on the surface, and it was all over the surface. So, to be honest, you saw a month later how much it sprouted. So it really, the rains hit just right and it sprouted. I have another area that we had unfortunately a saltwater spill on, and they came out and they hauled out 3 feet of soil over an acre. And we trucked in, thank God these guys worked with me. We trucked in 80 18-wheelers, 40 18-wheelers of topsoil from New Horizon, New Earth out on I-10, and 20 18-wheelers of compost. And we seeded that, and because they said, guys, Brice, we need to seed this. And I go, no, you need a firm seed bank. You need a firm base to seed into. And they said, no, we're going to seed it. And I said, okay, I don't believe it's going to work. And you're right. It was dry. I think the birds got a lot of it blew away, and because the soil was loose. And some of it has come up after the rains, but we're going to reseed that come this fall. So that we can, because it's going to be a firm seed bed that we're going to plant into, which it wasn't before. That's a key. Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations. Great work. I'm just wondering how much level of effort you put in throughout the process. We know how much it's costed you, but really like your time and your energy. Could you talk about that?
Well, in fact, how much she said, we know the question was, we know the cost that you put into it, but how much time and effort did you have to put into it? Well, when you hire a good contractor, it's just the worry. To be honest, that's the key. Get a good contractor, unless you have the equipment and can do it yourself. Get a good contractor. The guys that I work with, to me, are the absolute best. They are reasonable. They did everything on time, and they took a personal interest in the project. They wanted to see what would happen. Okay. And I personally didn't take a lot of time. The time is on me now because I'm always walking around, looking around, shredding areas around the perimeter that I don't want to spray yet, going with my chopping hoe, and if I see a KR blue stem plant, I'm chopping it out. So, I go out there minimum 1 day a week, 2 days a week, but it's still thriving from what we did to it. And the fear, the long-term maintenance is what the concern is. But the healthier you keep the natives, I'm hoping that the least the least trouble, the less trouble I'm gonna have with invasive. And you can't overgraze it. You gotta honor that biomass above the surface and not take more than 3/4 of that. Because you're gonna start damaging the below ground ecosystem and the roots.
One last question.
It's-
Yeah, me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to talk about doing it in a much smaller area. I live in an average sized home, on Blackland Prairie with a front yard and a backyard. And had work done where you would, dig up dirt and then pile it up, so you'd have a berm and you'd have a, like bioswale where you could keep water. And then tons of seed was put on it. And, it was said about the same time you did yours. And the thing that's kind of bothering me is we had all of this rain and also trees come up and you get shade in certain places. And now I'm not seeing my cytosgrama and so, you know, I'm seeing something that's always been there. It's probably, I know you're not supposed to say this, but weed, you know, I'm not sure if it's native or not. And I don't know any other way of doing anything about that other than weeding, you know, just like them.
Well, you know what I did, so you saw my grass, the question was, I'm a homeowner, I have an area within my property that I would like to do something like that. And I did it at the same time, but I'm not seeing what you've done. Okay, so you saw my grass test plot.
Mhm.
I went out there and chopped it all by hand. And I would pull out the Bermuda grass, you know, and all the weeds, like you'd say. And the thing is, in this catalog in the back are those bare roots.
Oh, yes,
So I thought,
somewhere else.
I said, if I plant roots, now you order them in like late February, early March, order them. And they'll ship them to you because they're in Junction, Texas. And they'll ship them to you. And I thought, why do I want to plant seed? Number one, I don't know what they look like. I don't know how to plant the grass seed because in this picture, look at this crusty white surface. This is what you want to plant into. You don't want to plant into loose dirt, okay?
Into what?
Loose dirt. You
Oh.
want to be in a firm seed bed. And that's another thing, that online class that I talked about, excellent 5-hour online course.
Oh, yeah, and
Okay.
how do you find out about that? You call,
It's online. This presentation will be online later, but it's through the A&M, Texas A&M AgriLife.
yeah,
And the name of the course is Native Seeding Certification.
and
$100, 6 hours. And you have access to it for 1 year. Awesome class. A lot of information, and it's in modules, so you can go from one to another and do it. So anyway,
thank you.
yeah, it's real. And then what I did for my garden, so I have a 70 by 20-foot garden, and I feed a lot of people with cucumbers and okra. But what I did is I solarized it. I got that black plastic and I solarized that area for like a year. And it pretty much killed everything. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for coming and have a good night. And if you're looking for plants, we still have some over, you can find there in the room, plant by donation. Yeah.